Emma was about to experience the biggest moment of her career when tragedy struck. She discovered that her fiancé, Bruce, had betrayed her with her best friend, Claire. After a devastating accident, her pain transformed into a burning desire for revenge. Emma looked at herself in the mirror. Her sunken, dull eyes reflected not only exhaustion but the betrayal that had stolen everything from her. Her studio, once filled with color, now resembled a tomb. The air was heavy, suffocating, and every corner reminded her of Bruce and Claire. How could they? She murmured softly, her voice trembling. Bruce, her longtime fiancé, hadn't just ended their relationship without warning. He had left with her best friend, Claire, taking with them the projects Emma had entrusted to both of them. The blow was not only emotional. Her works, which were a step away from being displayed in a prestigious gallery, were now in their hands. She had spent months working on a series of paintings that portrayed her soul, blending realism with surrealism that had begun to attract the attention of the art world. But now, all that effort belonged to them. The phone rang. It was the curator of the exhibition. "Emma, dear, I just called to check if the final details of the contract are in order. Bruce has already delivered the projects to me, and they're impressive." She remained silent, feeling a knot in her throat. "Emma, are you there?" "Yes, I'm here." Her voice came out weaker than she would have liked. She hung up without saying anything else, without giving any explanations. The curator didn't know that Bruce and Claire had turned their backs on her. No one knew. Slumped on the couch, her mind whirled with memories. The discovery of the betrayal, the bottled-up anger, and now, the hopelessness. She had no one left. Her bank account was in the red, with no more contracts, no friends, no love. And for the first time, Emma considered the possibility of disappearing. It was then that, out of the blue, a message arrived on her phone. An invitation to an exhibition in a distant coastal town. Last chance, she thought, without any real hope. She grabbed her bag and, without looking back, left home with a single suitcase and a broken heart. The cold wind cut across Emma's face as she drove along the winding road toward the small coastal town. The cloudy sky mirrored the turmoil of emotions within her. Her destination, a modest exhibition without grand pretensions, felt more like an escape than a real opportunity. Memories of Bruce and Claire haunted her, and the recent betrayal was an unbearable weight. She was fragile but determined to keep going, even if she didn't know exactly where it would lead her. The deserted road was flanked by hills, and in the distance, the sound of waves crashing against the rocks brought a sense of isolation. Her old sedan creaked with every turn, as if, like her, it was on the verge of giving up. Emma barely noticed how fast she was driving, so absorbed was she in the dark thoughts that consumed her. Suddenly, a blinding flash appeared in front of her, accompanied by a violent crash. She instinctively tried to swerve, but the car veered off the road, tumbling down the embankment. Everything happened in seconds: the twisted metal, the brutal impact, and then silence. When Emma opened her eyes, the world around her was spinning. She was upside down, trapped by her seatbelt, and the smell of gasoline seeped through the shattered windows. A distant sound, perhaps the sea, mingled with the noise of something dripping slowly. The pain coursing through her body was so sharp it took her breath away. "Is this the end?" she thought as she struggled to stay conscious. The world around her began to fade into darkness. Memories of the past few months flashed through her mind like snapshots. The betrayal, the theft, the emptiness, and then nothing. That was the last thing she would remember before being enveloped by darkness. Emma awoke with the sensation that time had stopped. Her eyes opened slowly, and everything around her felt strange and unfamiliar. She was lying in a hospital bed, the gentle sounds of machines surrounding her. An elderly woman with a kind expression sat beside her, holding her hand. "You're awake, dear," the woman said, her voice soft yet filled with relief. "Thank God." Emma blinked, confused. The pain in her body was unbearable. She tried to move, but it felt as if her body were pinned down by an invisible weight. A mix of panic and confusion overwhelmed her. Where am I? Her voice came out raspy, almost a whisper. You had an accident. You were found on the road near the beach. We're in the town of Blackwater, miles from where you came from. The woman smiled, but concern lingered in her eyes. Emma struggled to process the information. She had no idea how she had survived that accident. How did I survive? She asked, her voice weak. A fisherman found your car. He heard the crash and ran to help. You were lucky. You're alive, but it's going to take time to recover, the woman replied, her tone reassuring. As the days passed, Emma learned that the accident had caused several fractures, but, miraculously, there was no severe damage to her spine or brain. She was broken on the outside, but it was what she felt on the inside that truly devastated her. Time moved slowly as she healed, and Emma realized that the small coastal town, though isolated, brought a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Without news of Bruce or Claire, without friends, she found herself with a blank slate. It was during one of those lonely nights that an idea began to form in her mind. A way to start over. Perhaps it was time to bury the past. Change everything. One night, while gazing at the moon through the hospital window, she whispered to herself, I am no longer Emma. The name sounded like an anchor, something that kept her tethered to her suffering. No. She needed to be someone else. Liberty, she said aloud, testing the sound of the word on her lips. Yes, that feels right. She had been reborn. Emma had died in that accident, and now Liberty would begin to take her place. A new life, a new identity, a new purpose. Liberty, now fully recovered physically but still carrying emotional scars, decided not to return to the city where everything had collapsed. The town of Blackwater became her refuge, a place where she could hide from painful memories. During her recovery, she began to paint again, but this time with a different fervor. The canvases that once expressed hope and delicacy were now filled with aggressive strokes, dark colors, and distorted images that reflected her pain and anger. Her paintings depicted the betrayal she had suffered, the faces of Bruce and Claire disguised among shadowy figures. It was at one of these local exhibitions, where she showcased her new works, that Liberty met Mike. He was a successful businessman, a discreet millionaire who was captivated not only by Liberty's talent, but also by the quiet strength she emanated. Mike was the opposite of Bruce. Where Bruce had been manipulative and selfish, Mike was kind and offered security. There's something in your paintings, a pain I recognize, Mike said after purchasing one of her pieces. Liberty looked at him, surprised. Few people saw beyond the brushstrokes. Everyone has scars, she replied, her tone holding a bitterness she still couldn't hide. Over time, Mike and Liberty grew closer. He helped her build a new life, supporting her career as an artist and offering the stability she had never known. Slowly, Liberty's heart, which had closed off after Bruce's betrayal, began to open to the idea of new love. But deep inside her, the desire for revenge against those who had destroyed her still burned fiercely. She knew that one day, she would have to return and settle the score. Liberty, now with blonde hair, looked out at the horizon from the balcony of her new home and her new life. The sea, so close, whispered secrets in the waves crashing against the rocks. Blackwater had become her home, but the desire for justice gnawed at her inside. Years had passed since the accident, and now, with Mike by her side, she had financial stability, recognition in the art world, and, most importantly, time to plan her revenge. Bruce and Claire, after stealing her work and trust, had become well-known figures in her hometown. Using the ideas they had stolen from Emma, their exhibitions received critical acclaim. Emma, or rather Liberty, was aware of this. She followed every news story, every review of their shows, never forgetting what they had done. As Mike became her fiancé, Liberty was careful not to reveal her darker plans. To Mike, she was a brilliant artist, a strong woman who had overcome tragedy, but the side of her that nurtured hatred, the desire for revenge, remained hidden. He saw her as someone who had left the past behind. However, for Liberty, the opportunity to strike back was approaching, and nothing would make her give up. One afternoon, while painting in the studio that Mike had helped her build, Liberty received an unexpected call. It was from a major gallery in her hometown. "Miss Liberty?" The voice on the other end was formal. "We are very interested in a solo exhibition of your work. Your style has been making a significant impact, and we believe it would be a success. Can we schedule a meeting?" Liberty stayed silent for a moment, her heart racing. This was the perfect chance. Destiny was calling. "It would be an honor," she replied, containing the excitement bubbling within her. After hanging up the phone, she closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a mix of anxiety and anticipation. It was decided. She would return to the town that had almost destroyed her, but this time not as Emma, the naive artist, but as Liberty, a woman reborn from the ashes and ready to reclaim what was hers. That night, during dinner, Mike watched her closely. He noticed something different about her, an unusual energy. "Any news?" he asked as he cut a piece of salmon. Liberty hesitated for a moment, but knew she couldn't hide everything from Mike. "I received an invitation to exhibit in a gallery in my hometown," she said, looking into his eyes. Mike paused for a moment, processing the information. "That's great, right?" he asked, though he knew that returning to that place would bring painful memories. Liberty smiled, but there was a shadow in her gaze. "Yes, it's a big opportunity. I think. Maybe it's time to close some doors from the past," she said, choosing her words carefully. Mike reached for her hand, his touch gentle and protective. "I'll be with you, Liberty. Whatever it is, we'll face it together," he said firmly. Liberty smiled at him, but inside, she knew this was a battle she would need to fight alone. There were things Mike would never understand, and that she wouldn't let him know. The journey back to her hometown was strangely silent. Familiar landscapes emerged as the car moved along the road, but Liberty barely recognized the places she once knew so well. The town seemed smaller, lacking the sparkle she remembered, but the memories were still there, hidden in the corners and facades of the buildings. Upon arriving at the luxurious hotel that Mike had booked for her, Liberty realized how drastically her life had changed. From a betrayed woman with no resources, she was now a renowned artist, engaged to a millionaire and preparing for an exhibition in one of the city's top galleries. Yet, despite her accomplishments, the only thing that truly mattered was what was about to happen. The exhibition was scheduled for 3 days later, and Liberty knew that Bruce and Claire would be there. How could they resist the chance to see a rising new artist, especially an unknown who had gained fame so quickly? On the first night, Liberty walked through the streets of the town, feeling the penetrating cold and the humidity rising from the asphalt. She passed by the old studio she had shared with Bruce. It was closed, the sign fallen, and the facade weathered, but the emotional impact of seeing the place where so many promises had been made and broken was profound. She felt a pang of nostalgia, but quickly replaced it with determination. That was the past. Now, she controlled her destiny. The next day, she visited the gallery to prepare the final details. Her paintings were already on display, and the gallery director, a well-spoken man impressed by her work, praised the visual and emotional impact of her paintings. "Your work is deeply disturbing, yet also fascinating," he said as they walked through the corridors. "It seems that each piece tells a story of pain, but with a thread of hope." Liberty smiled, a cold, calculated smile. "Each painting has a piece of me," she replied. "And of you too," she thought, referring to Bruce and Claire. As she walked through the gallery, she stopped in front of the largest of her paintings, a piece that occupied an entire wall. From a distance, it appeared abstract, but as one approached, the faces of 2 people emerged, hidden in the chaotic brushstrokes. Bruce and Claire, their unmistakable features entwined in a web of shadows. The artwork was not just an exhibition of art. It was a trap. On the night of the opening, Liberty would be ready to expose not only her works, but also the betrayals that had destroyed Emma. And when Bruce and Claire finally saw the painting, there would be no escaping the truth it revealed. The night had finally arrived. The grand event at the gallery was about to begin, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation and excitement. The white walls, glowing under soft lighting, contrasted with Liberty's intense and unsettling artworks. Critics, collectors, and influential figures from the art world were already present, but Liberty knew that the two most awaited guests had yet to arrive. Dressed in an elegant black dress, Liberty moved through the hall with the confidence of someone who had left the past behind. Her name was on everyone's lips. Whispers about her work, her innovative techniques, and the emotional depth of her creations echoed throughout the space. She smiled coldly, knowing that soon the focus would shift. It wouldn't be just about the art anymore. It would be about what was about to be revealed. As she greeted the guests, the sound of the main door opening caught her attention. Bruce and Claire had arrived. They entered together, as if they were celebrities. Bruce, with his confident smile and natural charm, and Claire, radiating false innocence, seemed unaware of what awaited them. Liberty watched them from a distance, her heart racing with anticipation, yet her face remained serene. As they approached, they didn't recognize her immediately. The name Liberty and her new appearance were perfect disguises. Now blonde, with a refined style and an air of strength, Emma had completely vanished. "Liberty?" Bruce asked, extending his hand to greet her. "Nice to meet you. Your work is impressive." Liberty took his hand, feeling the coldness of his skin against hers. Her gaze met Claire's, who smiled politely, showing no flicker of recognition. "The pleasure is all mine," Liberty replied, her voice steady. "I'm glad you could come." Inside, tension was building. With each exchanged word, she relived the pain, the betrayal, the humiliation. But this was not the time for impulsive revelations. She would wait for the right moment, the climax she had meticulously planned. "And the artworks, are they all yours?" Claire asked, genuinely curious as she walked towards the canvases.
"Yes."
"Each one of them," Liberty said, her eyes locked on Claire's, hoping she would understand the hidden subtext. "They are personal." Bruce and Claire wandered through the gallery, examining the paintings without realizing their own images were hidden within the layers of paint. The last piece they would see was the large painting at the end of the hall, the work Liberty had created as the centerpiece of the exhibition, the culmination of her revenge. As guests began to gather around the final piece, Liberty ascended the makeshift stage. The crowd turned to her, and the hum of conversations faded into silence. "Good evening, everyone." Her voice echoed through the hall, firm and assured. "I would like to thank you for being here tonight. This exhibition is special to me in many ways. Each piece here is a part of my journey, a personal story that I share with you. But there is one piece in particular that represents something deeper." The audience was attentive, captivated by the serious and introspective tone of her words. Bruce and Claire, now curious, moved closer to the stage, their full attention on her. "Throughout my life, I have faced moments of pain and betrayal," Liberty continued, her voice gaining intensity. "People I trusted destroyed what I had built, stole what was mine. But as all of you can see, from those ashes, something new has emerged. A new strength, a new identity." Liberty turned to the large painting now shrouded in a thin veil. The crowd held its breath. "This final piece," she said, with a cold smile on her lips, "is the culmination of all that I am and all I have endured. It reveals hidden truths, truths that can no longer be ignored." She looked directly at Bruce and Claire before continuing. "And now, I reveal them to you." With a firm motion, Liberty pulled the veil away, exposing the enormous painting. The impact was immediate. People moved closer to see the details, and that was when the murmurs began. From a distance, the painting seemed chaotic, but as they approached, the faces of Bruce and Claire became visible. Their expressions, hidden among shadows and strokes of despair, were unmistakable. Bruce took a step back, his face pale. Claire, with wide eyes, covered her mouth with her hands. What is this?" Claire asked, her voice faltering. Liberty descended from the stage, walking slowly toward them. The hall was silent, all eyes on the scene. She stopped in front of Bruce and Claire, her gaze now merciless. "This," she said calmly, "is what you did to me. It is what you stole. My ideas, my work, my life. You destroyed me, but in the end, I was the one who triumphed. Now, everyone here knows the truth. The silence was suffocating. Bruce tried to respond, but the words seemed to get lost in his throat. Claire, trembling, looked as if she were about to cry. Emma? Bruce whispered, finally understanding. Emma died in that accident, Liberty replied, her voice as cold as ice. Now I am Liberty. And you are nothing. The revelation hit the gallery like a bomb. The shock and surprise on the faces of the guests were unmistakable. The news spread like wildfire. Critics and journalists, who had initially come for a simple art exhibition, now found themselves in the midst of a monumental scandal. Cell phone cameras started recording, and flashes illuminated the space. Bruce, still shaken, tried to approach Liberty. Emma, he stammered, but before he could continue, Liberty interrupted him. There's nothing more to say, Bruce. Your story is over, she declared, her voice echoing through the hall. Claire, tears streaming down her face, ran out of the gallery, unable to bear the pressure. Bruce followed her, desperate, leaving Liberty alone at the center of attention. But unlike before, she was not vulnerable. This time, she had won. The guests still murmured, shocked by what they had witnessed. Many approached to congratulate her, but Liberty was no longer interested in their opinions. She had done what needed to be done. As the night came to a close, Liberty stepped out of the gallery and took a deep breath of the cool night air. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. The hotel door closed behind Liberty, muffling the sounds of the city still buzzing after the impact of the revelation in the gallery. She entered the luxurious room, kicked off her shoes, and sank into the sofa, exhausted. The air felt heavy, as if the weight of years of pain had finally been released that night. But instead of relief, what Liberty felt was a nagging emptiness. The revenge that had long fueled her desire to move forward had been fulfilled. Bruce and Claire had been exposed, their careers and reputations shattered before everyone. Claire's face crumbling in tears and Bruce's look of despair haunted her mind. She had defeated them. Mike, who had stood by her side throughout the night, entered the room shortly after. He approached quietly, observing her from a distance, as if trying to understand what was happening in her mind. Liberty looked up when he sat beside her, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. You did what you needed to do, he said softly finally. They deserved everything they got. Liberty glanced at her hands, as if reliving every detail of the night. I waited so long for this, she murmured. And now that it's happened, it doesn't feel like I thought it would. Mike took her hand, his eyes attentive and understanding. Revenge has a price, Liberty. Sometimes what we think will bring us peace ends up bringing something different. But what matters is that now you can move on. You're free from them. Liberty nodded, though there was still a weight in her chest. The emptiness was something she hadn't expected. She had spent so long living for this moment that now, with everything over, she didn't know how to feel. Mike got up and walked to the side table, where there was a bottle of wine. He poured 2 glasses and returned to the sofa, handing one to Liberty. To freedom, he said, with an encouraging smile. She took the glass, but before drinking, something inside her hesitated. The word freedom felt hollow now. She had taken back what was hers, destroyed those who had betrayed her, but it hadn't truly set her free. Not from the pain, not from the memories. That night, Liberty couldn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling while the city around her continued to pulse with life. The scenes from the gallery replayed in her mind over and over. Bruce's devastated gaze, Claire's muffled cries, the murmurs and shocked looks from the audience. It was the end, but not the end she had imagined. The days following the exhibition were a whirlwind. The story of Bruce and Claire's betrayal spread quickly through the city and the media. Social media was flooded with comments about the scandal, and art magazines highlighted Liberty's courage in exposing the truth so publicly. Bruce and Claire, once celebrated, were now seen as traitors, their careers stained by the revelation. Despite all this, Liberty kept her distance from the press and the commotion. She avoided phone calls from journalists and ignored messages from curious acquaintances and old friends. Somehow, all the attention only made her feel more disconnected. Mike noticed this change in her. Even after the revenge, there was something Liberty couldn't let go of. One night, he found her sitting on the hotel balcony, gazing at the starry sky. "You're not happy, are you?" he asked, sitting beside her. Liberty took a deep breath, feeling the cool night breeze. "I thought this would bring me peace," she admitted. "But I don't feel that way. Not the way I imagined." Mike wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "You have me now. You have your art, your life. What Bruce and Claire did doesn't define who you are," he said, trying to find the right words. Liberty closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the comfort of his words. "I know, Mike, and I'm grateful for that. But there's a part of me that got lost in all of this. I stopped being Emma to become Liberty, but now I don't even know who I really am." She paused, looking at the stars and sky. "I am the woman who avenged what was hers. But am I more than that? Or have I lost something greater along the way?" Mike didn't respond immediately. He understood that this was a journey Liberty would need to take on her own. He would be by her side, but some answers only she could find. "Maybe it's time to find a new purpose," he suggested gently. "Something that doesn't involve revenge or the past. Something that is just for you." Liberty looked at him, his words slowly penetrating her mind. "Maybe," she murmured, though the idea of starting over still felt daunting. She had spent so long being defined by pain and the quest for justice that she didn't know how to move forward without it. Liberty spent the following days reflecting on Mike's words. For the first time in years, she found herself without a clear goal, without an enemy to confront or a battle to fight. But slowly, she began to realize that perhaps that was what she needed. Maybe it was time to set aside the identity built around revenge and seek something more. On a sunny morning, she decided to walk through the city streets. People still recognized her, but the frenzy was starting to subside. As she walked, she was drawn to a small gallery tucked away on a quiet street, far from the lights and glamour of the big exhibitions. Inside, there were simple paintings by unknown artists, but they were full of life and authenticity, something she hadn't seen in a long time. One of the pieces resonated deeply with her. It was a painting of a woman sitting by a lake, alone, but with a look of peace on her face. Liberty stood in front of the painting for a long time, feeling something stir within her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she was open to the idea of discovering it. The visit to the small gallery had a profound impact on Liberty. For a long time, her art had been a reflection of her pain and her need for revenge. Now, observing the simple and sincere works of unknown artists, she realized that there might be a new way to express herself, one that wasn't solely fueled by the wounds of the past. The painting of the woman by the lake lingered in her mind, as if the piece depicted was something she, too, desired but didn't know how to attain. That afternoon, Liberty returned to the hotel, determined to do something different. She grabbed a sketchbook, settled on the balcony, and began to sketch. This time, there was no anger in her strokes, nor pain hidden in the shadows. What emerged on the page was a tranquil scene, a serene landscape of a deserted beach where the waves gently kissed the sand. As the drawing took shape, Liberty felt, for the first time in a long while, a light sigh of relief in her chest. She spent hours on that balcony, drawing at her own pace, free from the pressure to prove something to anyone. It was just her and the paper, and that was enough. In the days that followed, Liberty began to explore the city in a different light. She wandered through unfamiliar neighborhoods, visited art markets, and engaged with small artisans and painters. She discovered a beauty in the simplicity of everyday life that she had long forgotten. Instead of constantly seeking perfection or approval from the art world, she started to appreciate the little things: the texture of a fabric, the sound of a sculptor's hammer in a modest shop, the smile of a local artist as they explained their work. Meanwhile, Bruce and Claire had vanished from the public scene. After the scandal, both withdrew from the art world, and news about them ceased. Yet, surprisingly, Liberty didn't feel satisfaction in this. They no longer mattered. What truly mattered now was finding something that would make her feel whole again, far from the chaos they had inflicted on her life. Back in her studio in Blackwater, Liberty was preparing for something new. The old paintings, filled with pain and vengeance, were still there, but now they were reminders of a past she no longer needed to carry. One afternoon, while organizing the studio, Mike entered quietly and watched her rearranging the canvases. "What are you going to do with those paintings?" he asked, pointing at the old works. Liberty paused and looked at the paintings. They were still important, a reflection of everything she had lived through and overcome, but they no longer represented who she wanted to be. "I think it's time to let them go," she said calmly. "I've told that story. Now I need to tell another." Mike stepped closer, curious. "And what story would that be?" Liberty smiled softly. "I'm still figuring that out." In the following days, she decided to start working on a new series of paintings, but this time, the approach would be different. The canvases would no longer focus on revenge or betrayal, but on something lighter, perhaps even simpler. She began painting landscapes of Blackwater, the beaches that had been her refuge, the sea that calmed her so much. Each brushstroke brought a little more peace, and gradually, her art became an extension of who she was again, but now a version of herself seeking healing, not retribution. A few weeks later, while walking through the city, Liberty received an unexpected call. It was from an old friend from the town where Bruce and Claire still lived. His voice was nervous, and the words he said made her stop in the middle of the street. "Claire is in the hospital, Liberty," he said directly. "She's done well. Very unwell. And Bruce, he's gone." Liberty's stomach churned. For a moment, she was speechless. The last thing she expected was to be confronted with the past again, especially in this way. "What happened?" she asked cautiously. Claire had a nervous breakdown right after everything that happened at the gallery. She isolated herself from everyone, and now she's in a psychiatric hospital. No one knows what really led to this, but Bruce ran away as soon as he found out she was in trouble. No one has seen him since. Liberty felt a mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to believe this was a direct consequence of their selfish choices, but another, more human part felt a pang of compassion. Claire was destroyed, and Bruce, cowardly as ever, had disappeared instead of facing the consequences of his actions. "And why are you telling me this?" Liberty asked, trying to understand why her friend thought she needed to know. "I thought that maybe," he hesitated, "you might want to talk to her." "I don't know, Liberty. She's really bad off." Liberty hung up the phone without answering, feeling the weight of the decision on her shoulders. Talk to Claire? See the woman who had betrayed her trust now in a state of extreme fragility. It was something she had never considered. But that night, while reflecting alone in the studio, the question echoed in her mind. Should she visit her? Could there be some final piece in this encounter? The revenge had already been completed, but was it possible to find some form of healing for both of them? 2 days later, Liberty found herself standing in front of the psychiatric hospital. The structure was cold and impersonal, like any institution designed to contain pain and suffering. She took a deep breath before entering, feeling a mix of nervousness and reluctance. The reason she was there was still not entirely clear to her. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps the need to close that chapter once and for all. As she was led through the white, silent corridors, Liberty began to wonder if this was really the right decision. When she finally reached Claire's room, her heart started to race. The nurse left her alone, and Liberty hesitated before opening the door. Claire was sitting in an armchair, looking out the window, her eyes lost at some distant point on the horizon. She looked like a shadow of the woman she once was. Her disheveled hair, pale face, and deep dark circles were visible signs of her downfall. When Liberty entered, Claire slowly turned around, her eyes dull, as if she were seeing a ghost. "Emma?" Her voice came out weak and trembling. Liberty closed the door behind her and stood there, frozen, for a long moment. "No," she said firmly, but without cruelty. "Emma is gone. Now I am Liberty." Claire blinked, confused, trying to process the words. The silence between them was heavy, almost suffocating. Claire began, but her voice faltered. She looked as broken as Liberty had been years ago. "I'm so sorry." Liberty remained silent. Claire's words felt small in light of what she had done. Yet, At the same time, seeing that shattered woman brought her no pleasure. The revenge had already served its purpose. Now, what remained was the emptiness. I didn't come here to forgive you, Liberty finally said. But I also didn't come to condemn you. That doesn't matter to me anymore. Claire looked at her, her eyes filling with tears. So, why did you come? Liberty took a deep breath. Why had she come? To close something? To see Claire suffer? Perhaps that was it at first. But now, looking at the broken woman in front of her, something within Liberty was changing. Maybe to free myself for good, she replied, with a sincerity she hadn't expected. The two remained silent, but for the first time, Liberty felt she was truly leaving the past behind. The silence in the hospital room was almost palpable as Claire continued to look at Liberty, tears slowly streaming down her face. For her, seeing Emma, now Liberty, was more than just an unexpected visit. It was a manifestation of the weight of her guilt. Claire had always been the confident woman, relying on the power of her seduction and influence. But now, in front of the one she had betrayed, she felt small, irrelevant, at the mercy of a fate she had sealed herself. Liberty, on the other hand, didn't feel the satisfaction she had once imagined at seeing Claire suffer. She realized now that true revenge wasn't about witnessing the collapse of those who had hurt her, but rather about moving forward while others remained behind, trapped by their choices. Claire and Bruce had been shadows haunting her past, but now, standing before Claire, she knew that chapter was truly coming to an end. I should never have done what I did, Emma, Claire murmured, her voice filled with regret. I thought that. I don't know what I thought. But I was wrong, I was so wrong. Liberty remained silent, her expression unwavering. Inside, a silent battle was taking place. A part of her wanted to leave Claire at the bottom of the pit she had dug for herself. But the other part, the part that had found Mike, rebuilt her life, and chosen a new path, felt that perhaps it was time to close the open wound that connected her to the past. It doesn't matter anymore what you did, Claire, Liberty said calmly. I'm not here to seek answers or apologies. That doesn't change anything for me now. Claire sobbed. The guilt seemed to crush her. I lost everything, she whispered. Bruce, he left me. He ran away. I thought that. We were in this together, but he's gone, Emma. And I'm alone. Liberty felt a twinge of sadness at hearing this. Not for Claire, but for herself, for having once believed these people were her family, her closest confidants. And now, as Claire crumbled before her, it became clear how weak both Bruce and Claire had always been. The masks of confidence and success they wore had fallen away, revealing the emptiness and selfishness in which they lived. Maybe it's time for you to deal with this on your own, Liberty replied, without cruelty, but also without compassion. Claire nodded, as if she understood that this was the truth she had been avoiding for so long. The tears continued to flow, and she no longer tried to justify her actions or ask for forgiveness. Something had shifted in the dynamic between them. Claire seemed to accept that this meeting was the closure of a cycle. I'm so sorry, Claire repeated, her voice a trembling whisper, before looking away toward the window. Liberty slowly stood up. There was nothing more to say. The compassion she had hoped to feel never came, but neither did the anger. The emptiness she had felt in the past months began to be filled with something different, something closer to peace. Before leaving, Liberty looked at Claire one last time. Goodbye, Claire, she said firmly, closing the door behind her. In the following months, Liberty and Mike entered a new phase in their lives. With the ghosts of the past finally buried, Liberty allowed herself to explore new possibilities without the constant weight of revenge or pain. Her art changed dramatically. The canvases were now filled with life, color, and hope, a reflection of her new perspective. She and Mike traveled together, visiting cities and meeting local artists, absorbing the cultural diversity that the world had to offer. Each new place brought different inspiration, and Liberty began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: excitement for the future. Her relationship with Mike also deepened. They became not only partners in life, but also in art. Mike, ever supportive, helped organize new exhibitions for Liberty, encouraging her to expand her creative horizons. The trust he placed in her was like an anchor, keeping her steady as she navigated these new waters. One afternoon, while strolling through a small seaside town in Europe, Liberty stopped in front of an outdoor cafe, watching street artists paint large murals. "Do you remember when all of this was just an escape?" she said, turning to Mike. "When I was running away from my own life." Mike took her hand and smiled. "And look where you are now," he replied. "It's no longer an escape, Liberty. Now you're building something new, something that's all yours." Liberty smiled back at him, feeling the warmth of his words. He was right. What had once been a desperate attempt to flee from the past had transformed into a journey of self-discovery and renewal. Months later, Liberty organized a new exhibition, but this time, it was different. The focus was not on the past, the pains, or the betrayals. Instead, her new paintings spoke of renewal, hope, and healing. The gallery was packed, and critics were amazed by the change in her style and approach. "Your new works are so different," commented a critic as he walked through the exhibition. "They have an energy, a lightness that I've never seen before." Liberty smiled, pleased with the feedback, but, above all, satisfied with herself. For the first time, she felt that her paintings reflected who she truly was, not just who she had been. At the end of her exhibition night, Liberty stepped away from the crowd and observed her works from a distance. She felt an inner peace she had never experienced before. Beside her, Mike appeared, holding 2 glasses of wine. "To new beginnings," he said, extending one of the glasses to her. Liberty took the glass and toasted, her smile revealing the calm and confidence that now guided her life. "To true freedom," she replied, raising her glass. Liberty knew that the future was still uncertain, but it no longer frightened her. For the first time in a long while, she was ready to face whatever came her way, with her heart and mind open to what life had to offer. The cycle had finally closed, and with it came true freedom. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and share the video. Until next time.